Satan loosed is the subject of this section of the eschatological timeline. We see in Revelations 19:20 that the false prophet was cast into the lake of fire, and it says, it begins up here, and the wild beast was laid hold of, and with this one, the false prophet, performing the signs before him, in which he misled the ones receiving the imprint of the wild beast, and the ones doing obeisance to his image. The two were thrown living into the lake of fire, burning with sulfur, and the rest were killed by the broadsword of the one sitting upon the horse, by the one going forth from out of his mouth. And all the birds were filled from their flesh. Now, we went through this before, but it's hard when going to another section to not lead into it with a previous section. So we see that the false prophet and the beast were thrown in, but it says, and I saw an angel coming down from out of the heaven, having the key of the abyss and a great chain in his hand, and he seized the dragon, the ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, the one misleading the inhabitable world, and bound him 1,000 years. So we had that, and then we had in Revelation 26, we had the 1,000-year reign. So now we have the devil and the false prophet and the beast thrown in. The beast and the false prophet in the lake of fire, but the Satan into the abyss for 1,000 years. But now, in Revelation 27, it says, and whenever the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. Now we're at the time of the subject of this section. And whenever the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, Satan will be loosed. And we went through the 1,000 years with the possibility of Ezekiel's temple being there at that time, possibly, maybe not. It might be a later time. We'll go through that in the next section. But he's loose. Satan will be loose from out of his prison and will come forth to mislead the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together for the war, which the number is as the sand of the sea. And they ascended upon the width of the earth and encircled the camp of the Holy One. So now we have the devil coming back, Satan, and this Gog and Magog people gathering together for war. And if the 1,000 years was the temple, then people were attacked at that time possibly. But I believe that Ezekiel's temple is a little bit later here. Now, people during this time, this was after the 1,000 years, and the 1,000 years could be a peaceful time. It's hard to exactly determine which part of the Bibles and the Revelation and so are going with which time, but definitely there's 1,000 years is a dividing time. And they ascended upon the width of the earth and encircled the camp of the holy ones. Now, holy ones, as I mentioned before, doesn't mean they're Christians. It could be the holy ones, whoever they are, that God has chosen, 144,000 probably, and other Jews and so forth, and people that have accepted the things of the Bible. And the city being loved. Now, it doesn't say Jerusalem. The city being loved. If it was Ezekiel's temple, then that would be the city of Ezekiel, or it could be Jerusalem. And fire came down from out of the heaven from God, and it devoured them. And so the devouring of these people. Now, we'll go to the Gog and Magog that's in the Bible back in Ezekiel chapter 39. And now, if this is the prophecy against Gog at the time of the New Testament, Gog and Magog, which is after the 1,000 years, and this is describing that. And it says, and You, O son of man, prophesy against Gog, and say, Thus says Kyrios, Kyrios, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, ruler of Rosh, Moshok, and Thuval. I will gather you and will lead you down and will haul you from the extreme north and will lead you upon the mountains of Israel. And I show where the extreme north would have been Moscow, and tying it into possibly today. And I will destroy your bow from your left hand and your arrows from your right hand. Now, I also mentioned chunks of the Bible are taken in one place for one certain thing, and then it continues, but the chunk changes of text for another period of time. So it's kind of difficult sometimes to follow which one's, what chunk is following what section. And it continues, and I will throw you down upon the mountains of Israel, and you shall fall, you and all the ones around you. And the nations with you shall be given to a multitude of birds. So this is, if this is when Satan is released, then this is what's going to happen. To every winged creature you'll be given for food. And I have given you to all the wild beasts of the plain to be devoured as carrion. Upon the face of the plain you shall fall, for I spoke, says the Lord, the Lord. And it continues, and I will send fire upon Magog. Now, first one was Gog, now Magog. So it could be the first part was for today, and this part now goes to the Gog and Magog of chapter 20 in Revelation. And I will send fire upon Magog, and the islands shall be inhabited in peace. So afterwards, 1,000 years, and they're defeated, we'll find out, and then peace comes to the earth. And they shall know that I am the Lord, and my holy name will be known in the midst of my people, Israel. And Israel is going to be come back. A lot of people question Ezekiel's temple and the sacrifices reinstituted. But God can do what he wants to do, how he wants to do it, if he wants to reinstitute sacrifices, and accept it. And my holy name shall not be profaned any longer. And the nations shall know that I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel. Behold, it is come. You shall know that it will be, says Kyrios, Kyrios. This is the day in which I spoke. And the ones dwelling the cities of Israel shall come forth and shall kindle a fire with the weapons, small shields and shafts and bows and arrows, rods of the hands and lances, and they shall kindle with them a fire for 7 years. And in no way should they take trees from out of the plain, nor should they fell trees from out of the groves, but only the weapons shall they incinerate with fire. Now earlier, if it was today, the idea of these nations being destroyed would be they would be burning the fuels from the tanks and the planes and the so forth. But if it's in the future, it could be a terrible time that the earth is incinerated and there is this firewood for fuel and so forth. And then it says, and they shall plunder the ones plundering them and shall despoil the ones despoiling them, says the Lord. So this is sort of talking about possibly the end of the time of Satan before he's thrown into the abyss finally. And it will be in that day I will appoint to Gog a place of renown, a memorial in Israel, a cemetery of the ones coming by the sea. And they shall enclose the cleft of the ravine and shall bury Gog there, wherever that is, and all his multitude. And it shall be called then the cemetery of Gog. And the house of Israel shall bury them, that the land should be cleansed in 7 months. And all the people of the land shall bury them, and it will be to them for a famous place in which day I was glorified, says the Lord, the Lord. Kyrios, Kyrios. And they shall give orders for men continually for coming over the land to bury the ones being left upon the face of the earth, to cleanse it. So you have all these dead bodies. And after the 7 months, and they shall seek. And everyone traveling over the land and seeing the bone of a man shall build a sign by it, put some kind of a stake there, until whenever the ones burying shall bury it in the cemetery of Gog. For even the name of the city is Polyandrion, cemetery. And the land shall be cleansed. And you, son of man, thus says the Lord, Kyrios, Kyrios, speak to every winged bird and to all the wild beasts of the plain, saying, Be gathered together and come. Be gathered together from all the surrounding places unto my sacrifice, which I sacrifice to you, a great sacrifice upon the mountains of Israel. And you shall eat meats and drink blood. You shall eat meats of giants, and you shall drink blood of rulers of the earth, of rams and calves and he-goats, and the calves all growing fat. And you shall eat fat until fullness, and you shall drink blood unto intoxication. A figure of speech, you don't get intoxicated with blood, but so much that it affects you somewhat. From my sacrifice in which I sacrificed to you, and you shall be filled from my table, the horse and rider and giant and every male warrior, says the Lord, the Lord. So this now is this situation of Gog and Magog mentioned in Revelation 20 and in Ezekiel chapter 39. Then we go to Revelation 20:10. And the devil, misleading them, was cast into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the wild beasts and the false prophet are. Now remember, we went to that back in 19, where the wild beasts and the false prophet are cast into the lake of fire, but the quadragon, as I call it, was cast into the abyss and came back. But now he's cast into the same place as these other two. And they will be tormented day and night into the eons of the eons, the unholy trinity, the quadragon, the false prophet, and the beast. Then, at that time, we see the sun and the moon are darkened, and this could be at that time that it says in Joel 3, or leading into it, in Joel 3:14, for a day of the Lord is near in the valley of punishment. So that could be with the destruction of all these armies coming against them. The sun and the moon shall darken, and the stars shall let down their brightness. And then we go into Amos 5:18. Woe, O ones desiring the day of the Lord, saying, What is this, the day of the Lord to us? Well, even this is darkness, and not light. It will be in which manner if a man should flee from the face of a lion, and a bear should fall to him. And so he's running away from a lion, and then he runs into a bear, and he should rush into his house and should fasten his hands upon the wall, and a serpent should bite it. There's no getting away. Is this not darkness? Is not darkness the day of the Lord, and not light, and dimness, not having brightness in it? So this terrible time, a lot of the bad things going on in the book of Revelation could be taken over now with the different calamities and the bowls being poured out in the book of Revelation, all that happening at this period of time. Now, the next section is called judgment, because after the destruction of all of this comes a judgment. But now, it's hard to say because the judgment sounds like it's at the very, very, very end, but we'll go through that in the next chapter and try to point this out. Because later we're going to go into the Aeonial kingdom, and which coincides, I believe, to the New Jerusalem. One's on earth and one's in the heaven. And this period of time seems like it goes to the very end. But yet there are still, at that time, as we'll find out in the future video section here, that there are still unbelievers and fornicators and bad people on the earth, even during Ezekiel's temple. So our next section here now is judgment.